Hello YouTube, Volkswagen Dave here, and this video is going to be on my Game Boy accessories. On the previous video I did a quick little view of all of my video game collection, so what I'm going to be doing is maybe uploading videos of more detail on specific things. For example, here we got the Game Boy accessories, I'm going to have the Game Boy games, and I'm going to move on to maybe Game Gear, NES, so on. There's going to be car videos obviously, but it's just going to be a mix of the two. And maybe we'll get into computer videos when I get that corner cleaned up. Anyways, not to get off topic, we got Game Boy games today, we got the Game Boy Pocket, we got Game Boy Color, and of course we got the Game Boy Advance SP that's piled over there, which I think I have most of the oddball accessories for, and that bucket holds all the accessories for all the Game Boy stuff. Alright, so let's get started in the Game Boy corner. Of course we have the Game Boy Pocket. This is basically my first portable console that I grew up with, alongside the Nintendo Entertainment System and eventually the Nintendo 64. This was my sister's originally, and when she upgraded to Game Boy Color, she gave me this. I remember fond memories, of course, the Pokemon series, as well as Donkey Kong Land, and oh yes, and Kirby's Dream Land. I was trying to remember. That's the Game Boy Pocket, excellent working condition. This is, of course, not the original fat model. This is the miniaturized version. And it just takes two AAA batteries, which is efficient and convenient compared to the 4 AA's that the original took. And I still have the original consumer information manual for it, so that's kind of cool. Of course, I have a bunch of cases for the Game Boy games I don't really use. Because of how I'm storing them, I should start using them, just keep the dust out of them. I, of course, have an AC adapter. I'm sure most of you should know. This allows you to plug your Game Boy into an electrical outlet so you can play indefinitely until you fall asleep in the couch. Of course, I do have some manuals. This one, Pokemon Trading Card Game, actually that's technically Game Boy Color, but it does work in Game Boy Pocket, so I just put it here. And James Bond 007, which I got later. And to finish off the Game Boy Pocket, I also have some connectors. This connector, obviously I can't use on mine. This is for the older fat Game Boy. It has the thicker, fatter cables. Of course, I do have an adapter to fix that problem. This allows me to hook up to either two Game Boy Pockets or two Game Boy Colors. And with an adapter, I can hook up the old fat Game Boy with a newer little Game Boy, so that works very well. And that's it for the Game Boy Pocket. Now, apologies for any of the focus. I got an awkward position so I can get proper lighting for you guys, so hopefully that's not a huge problem. But now moving on to the Game Boy Color. We have the Game Boy Color here. I don't remember exactly what the proper name of this color is, but it's basically like a aqua green kind of color. It's very nice. Again, it was originally my sister's, and then when she got a Game Boy Advance SP, she gave me this one. So that was kind of nice. Oh, I got Pokemon Blue in there right now. I have a Pokemon Silver version, Trainer's Guide. I also have a Rumble Pack, which is quite interesting. These are kind of shitty, I find. Maybe it's just the one I have, but it takes, of course, two AAA's. I shouldn't have those sitting in there. And it just plugs into the headphone port, and it rumbles based on the sound coming out of the Game Boy, but I find this kind of shit because usually most games play music, so instead of rumbling to the sound effects, it rumbles to the music and kind of ruins the effect. It's more like a musical vibrator. And then I have this. This is extremely useful. This basically sits on the Game Boy like that, and you flip it up and it's got a light on it, and it actually works well. You just plug it into the extension port, external port, and it uses the power from the external port to light the light, and I wish I had batteries in here to show you, but it works really well. It's let's put it this way, it's better than the original Game Boy Advance backlight, I think, so that's a very useful device. It of course came with this, which is just a little button adapter thing. The B&A button feels kind of better, but the D-pad is just a joke, so I don't use it. Of course, during this time period, rechargeable batteries were becoming a thing, so you could buy battery packs, rechargeable battery packs for the Game Boys. So we'll start with the Mad Catz. I got a cut wire here. These batteries are basically pooched. They'll last maybe 30 minutes if you're lucky. These are basically pooched. They're originally 600 milliamp hours, so you should have got at least 10 hours out of them, if not more. So I reused the plug for this homemade NiCad battery pack I made. Actually, I can use this right now to power the Game Boy. Just plug it in here. Okay, and now it's got a loose plug, but the Game Boy works. Running on the NiCads. And the NiCads that I'm using, these NiCads actually came out of a power drill, so I got the good batteries that were left. These I think still have like, I don't know, 20% of their original capacity, which is nothing, but for Game Boy is perfect. Now moving on to the official stuff. So again, Mad Catz charger and batteries. It's just a 300 milliamp charger. Actually, it's a 350 milliamp charger. You can also use these chargers to power the Game Boy because it actually has the same output as an AC adapter for the Game Boy. So technically, they can also act as third-party AC adapters. I also have a case for the Game Boy Color. Which brings us to this cool thing. This is the Power Pack Color. It's kind of a bulky thing, but believe it or not, I don't know what batteries they have in here. They're obviously nickel metal hydrides, but I want to know who made them. This thing is like over 10 years old, and the batteries still have 90% of their original capacity. I mean, the problem is they take forever to charge. Like normally they probably only take like 3 hours to charge, but this thing takes like 10 hours or more to properly charge. But when it's charged, it goes for 9 hours, which is amazing considering it claims brand new went for at least 10 hours. That's pretty awesome. Here's the unit here. This is the charger for it, and the plug just plugs into here. It's also got a little thing to tell you how much battery's left. Apparently it's down to like 10% or something here. That's normal for nickel metal hydrides, especially aged ones. Now I've opened this before. The batteries actually hide in here, and these are just adapters. And what you do is you can take this off, slap the battery pack in like that. It doesn't sit quite snug, but it does sit in there. You take this so you don't lose it. They got a little thing here, and now you're playing Game Boy with the battery pack. So that's quite awesome. And that's it for the Game Boy Color accessories. So not much in this division, not anything out of the ordinary. So now we'll move on to the Game Boy Advance SP. As you can see, I both have a Game Boy Advance SP and a Game Boy Micro. The Game Boy Micro was given to me as a gift for a birthday, and the Game Boy Advance SP was given to me by my sister when she got a Nintendo DS. So, let's start with the Game Boy Advance SP, because that's where most accessories are. Okay, so let's go through. Obviously, I have the Game Boy Advance SP, just a normal black version, and as you can see, it still works with the lithium battery, has the backlight, and all that jazz. All the accessories you see here, except for this and this, all came from a single package I got from Value Village for I think $12, called the Dream Gear package. Keep in mind, this AC adapter is the original AC adapter for charging this. Technically, if you got the right plug, you can charge this with a cell phone charger because it has the same battery that you'd find in a cell phone, a 3.7 volt lithium-ion battery, nothing special. Anyway, so what this came with was a little controller adapter, so the Game Boy Advance SP would feel like it's a controller. Came with a 12 volt adapter, so you can charge it on the go when you're in a car. Came with a connector, so you can connect to multiple Game Boy Advances for multiplayer, as well as trades. A little button adapter, similar to the one you saw in the Game Boy Color, except this one isn't chintzy. It's actually not bad. Came with a headphone jack adapter, so you can use the headphones on the Game Boy Advance SP. As you know, the Game Boy Advance SP didn't have a headphone jack. It also has a built-in radio. Yes, it's basically just a radio that's powered off the Game Boy Advance SP's external power, and then it has a headphone jack. So that's kind of interesting. It also came with a Dream Gear manual, which is very basic. And, of course, a magnifier, which magnifies the screen to twice the size. It actually works quite well. So we'll hook all that up. And I think the only thing here that wasn't Dream Gear was this, which basically allows you just plug in the back here. This would allow you to hook up to, again, another Game Boy Advance, or if you flick this switch here to GC, which stands for GameCube, you can hook it up to your GameCube and trade files with the GameCube for games that supported it. I forget if there's a proper name for that, but anyways. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hook all the Dream Gear accessories up to the Game Boy Advance SP and see how it looks when it's done. So here's what the Game Boy Advance SP looks like normally. Now we're going to hook up the stuff, and there you have it. That is a modified Game Boy Advance SP with a bunch of crap hooked up to it. I mean, just look at this thing. Let's turn it on. There we go. You can see that the screen is definitely a shit ton larger. That makes a big difference. It's got the buttons. You can access the switch here. The game's there, and of course, yeah, the headphone adapter. It's quite an odd looking thing. Makes it a lot less portable, but it is great for playing at home like that. Still don't know if I can use these buttons for it, but it does work well. You can't access... Oh, you can access the light with a little middle button there. That's odd. Anyways, so yeah, there's the Game Boy Advance SP with its accessories. And now we move on to the Game Boy Micro. Now, I do have the original box with all the documentation. Now, the interesting thing about the Game Boy Micro is it had a bit of a selling point. I mean, it's friggin' tiny. I mean, look at this thing. Like, look at it. It's so small. So it was great. You could put it basically in anything, and you could take it with you. Had a fairly good battery life for what it was. And it had a headphone jack, unlike the Game Boy Advance SP. And the interface was interchangeable. This one that I bought came with just a silver interface, which is in there, Cameo, or this flame one that I like. So it had interchangeable covers, which you probably get some custom ones on eBay easily. But it had several drawbacks that pissed some people off, I guess. In order to make it so small, they had to get rid of the chips that you'd find in the older Game Boys, so there was absolutely no backwards compatibility with any Game Boy Pocket or Game Boy Color games, so that really sucked. There was also the fact that it had its own type of port for charging, and I could be wrong, they might have had an adapter, but I don't think, see it says extension, but it had a different port, so you had to have a Game Boy Micro charger, you couldn't just use a Game Boy Advance SP charger, and you had to get a different connector with an adapter if you wanted this to hook up to other Game Boys that weren't Game Boy Micros. So that really screwed things over. So there was no backwards compatibility, and it did not use the universal connector you'd find on the other Game Boy Advances. So that was really dumb in my opinion. Other than that, it's actually a good feeling little unit. It's got a small screen, but that's why it's called the Game Boy Micro. So don't have much for this. It's just got its charger, the other optional covers it came with, just silver and Cameo. Guess I might as well just show you. There's the other kinds. And if you open it up, I'm pretty sure somewhere in here there's like a little piece that lets you get it off. There's a registration cover. If anyone wants me to go in more detail with this, since I have a complete box, let me know, and I will go into detail with the Game Boy Micro. Now, last but not least, I do have one accessory for the Game Boy Advance, and that is the Action Replay Max. Now, I got this for $5 at Game Haven, which is a Burlington retro game store. As is, there was one problem. It doesn't work. The CD worked fine, even though it's all scratchy shit. I mean, that's how it was. I bought it like that. But, anywho, sold fine. It connected to this fine, but there tended to be the problem. Even if you get codes on this, they will not work. For whatever reason, when you boot the game just doesn't, the cheats do not work, nothing works. So it is a non-working Action Replay Max. I looked it up a long time ago, went through some diagnostics like factory resetting, and it didn't fix it. So I think it's pretty much pooch, but I keep it anyway for novelty reasons. But it does have a pretty cool setup. So anyways, that is all of my Game Boy stuff. The next time I upload a video like this, I will be going through all the games I own for the Game Boy series. That's the original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. So, thanks for watching. This is Volkswagen Dave. Let me know what you thought of this video, and I'll see you next time.